Hi, everybody. Hello, welcome. So nice to be here with you. I hope to see you in the chat. Please put your name in the chat and let us know you're here. I'm Heather Nelson. I'm a corporate fundraising specialist. I'm the founder and CEO at Bridge Raise, and we're here today to talk about smarter grant fundraising. Thinking about calendaring, clarity, strategy with Elaine Navarro. I'm so excited to have Elaine here. Elaine and I have met through being business owners together, and I love what she does. She is the founder and chief awesome officer at Just Look Left. And the fact that she calls herself that just shows you what a warm and wonderful person she is. I know you're going to learn so much from her today. But before we get started, over to you, Elaine, to introduce yourselves and tell the group a little bit about you.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. It's great to be here. Great to see you again. I'm Elaine Navarro, founder and chief awesome officer of Just Look Left, creative grant consulting. When you own your own business, you can call yourself whatever you want. That's what I chose. So we are a full service grant consulting firm based here in Oregon. So on the west coast of the U.S., primarily serving Pacific Northwest based nonprofits. Industry agnostic. So anything from youth education, rural serving, BIPOC-led, BIPOC serving. I find that I didn't want to niche myself down into a certain sector because I find it also so fascinating. So that's what we do.
Yeah, it is so fascinating. It's actually one of my favorite parts, honestly, about consulting is about learning about all the different organizations and their missions and how they measure impact and the cool ways they make their work happen. So it doesn't surprise me that you like that as well. Before we get into the specific questions that are going to help people be so much smarter at grant fundraising, tell me how you define grant fundraising. So anybody thinking, hey, yeah, Elaine might be able to help me, or this session's for me, knows what we're going to talk about today.
For sure. So funding from grants can come from a variety of sources, anything from the federal government to state government, counties down to private philanthropy. So those are family foundations or private foundations that offer grants to nonprofit organizations primarily, sometimes for profit, but here in the States, at least about 98% of those are for nonprofits exclusively. So a few different avenues of where grant funding can come from.
Yeah, it's true. One of the things that comes up with my clients often is corporate fundraising, grant fundraising. And I think there are definitely key overlaps. I obviously, sort of separate corporate out, but I think for those of you who are doing corporate fundraising, because you're in my community, that might be your bent. I still think there's some really good learnings and places of overlap between what we each do. And one of them might actually come up right away. So when I started talking to you about, how to be successful at grant fundraising, what the smartest way to do that is, you said to me that the grant calendar is the hill you're willing to die on. I thought that was such a, impassioned statement. And I wanted to hear more from you about why the calendar, a grant calendar, what it is, I guess, and why that's so important.
Absolutely. So a grant calendar or funding strategy, we kind of use those terms interchangeably, is a 12 to 18-month roadmap of all the aligned opportunities available to a nonprofit organization. So that those can look very different depending upon where our clients are working geographically, their specific sector, whether they're more interested in private foundation grants or state and federal grants, that sort of thing. I often encounter when I'm doing discovery calls of folks saying, oh, we need grant funding. And I'm like, yes, and I'm sure you do. Let me see your grant calendar. And the first thing is they say, well, we don't have one. A grant opportunity may come into the purview of a board member who, brings it to the executive director. Can we apply for this? Or they're hearing about it, through the newspaper or through LinkedIn, but there's no formal strategy. And so I find that is the single most important piece when working with a new client, to make sure that we are being proactive rather than reactive. We have the correct amount of time ahead of time to be preparing for these grant applications, because I think we all know, and I'm sure that you see this in corporate as well, it's not something you can do in a day, at least not do it well. When we're talking about attachments and financials and letters of support and everything else that can go into it. So without a well-oiled strategy of those really highly aligned opportunities that they have the best chance of winning, we're throwing spaghetti at the wall, and it just doesn't work as well.
Yeah, well, no, it doesn't. And I want to hone in on one word that you used, which is one of my favorite words, alignment. So tell me a little bit about what that means in the grant context. What kinds of things you look for when you're, building out a grant calendar for an organization and you're trying to like think about alignment instead of like the random ideas that people are throwing at a staff person, without that piece of thinking.
For sure. Alignment is super important, and I look at it in a couple different ways. When there is a private foundation that has a web presence, you can go onto their website. You can clearly see they're going to list out their funding priorities, whether it's
Mhm.
education, equine therapy, whatever it's going to be. So very quickly you can see then, oh, well, youth education. My client is in that space. There's definitely alignment there. But even beyond that and digging deeper under the surface, is there alignment within the culture of that organization? And when we begin talking to program officers that are working at that organization, is there there's a deeper level of alignment than what we can see just on a website, which really requires a personal connection with somebody at that organization to really vet ahead of time before we even put pen to paper. So alignment is super important, but there's so many different ways that we can look at it, and it's the nuance of it. Understanding, well, within youth education, what particular piece is of most important to this organization, and that may not be apparent based on their past giving history or a website. It's really going to take that face-to-face conversation with a program officer to understand, okay, well, this particular organization really loves middle school or really loves kids that are at risk of getting involved in the juvenile justice system. What kind of piece of that can we hone in on and make sure that it is crystal clear that we are aligned with the funding priorities of this particular entity?
Yeah, super interesting. And when I talk about on my side, sort of this idea of discovery meetings where, you get that top layer, as you said, from a website, from a grant research portal, there's different ways to get that top level, but you don't really know until you go further. So tell me a little bit about that process from your side. When you put so do you put organizations sort of on the calendar for a charity, and then do a process of vetting them further, or is it you vet a bunch and then like, how does that work? And do you actually do the vetting, or does the organization do the like digging down deeper? Tell me a little bit more
For
about
sure.
how you really figure that alignment piece out.
Absolutely. And so I've been in this sector for a while now. And so here in Oregon specifically, I have a running list of what I call unicorn funders. Those are my favorite funders because they look at prospective grantees as equals. There's really not this power dynamic that I have often seen historically in philanthropy. They're really trying to understand, what do grantees need? How can we make this process as easy as possible? And they're really willing to have that conversation ahead of time. So I've had many, many, many conversations with program officers from all of my favorite grant funding entities, whether I'm representing a client and the client is in that room with me and I'm just kind of facilitating the meeting. Hey, so-and-so at this foundation, I know you. This is a really great client. I want you guys to connect. Go at it, have the conversation, and I'll be there to kind of fill in any holes as needed. But I've also, I'm friends with a lot of folks in this space, and I've met with them just on a one-on-one basis, not representing a client specifically, but knowing that because they're potentially a general operating funder, and they may fund a wide array of our clients, I'm there to just get to know them as a human being and understand, where is that funder headed? What are they really looking for in the grand scheme of things? What are some common pitfalls to avoid so that I can kind of take that information back and know why an entity or why an opportunity is on that grant calendar, and whether it rises to the top in terms of it's really great and I love it because of X, Y, and Z, or oops, maybe this funder is heading in a slightly different direction that isn't as aligned for this particular client, but we'll keep them in our back pocket, if things change down the road. So it can look a variety of different ways, but yes, we definitely facilitate those conversations. And I find that often clients are a little intimidated. Like my mantra is funders are friends. Like they really are. The right ones really are. And the people behind it are wonderful and they want to help you succeed. So we help our clients bridge that gap between, once they then start that conversation with a funder, it's now their new relationship to then take to the next level and leverage. But we're the foot in the door, which is really a fun position to be in.
I love that. I'm going to come back to the relationship thing, but I want to talk about what a unicorn funder looks like for a second, because I know those in Oregon, but some of the people listening, certainly my people, maybe from Canada, there may be people from the Eastern United States. So I have a couple of questions there. I feel like figuring out who unicorn funders are in your own geography might be something that people would really benefit from. So what are some characteristics when you say that, what are some characteristics that people should look for in identifying those kind of funders so that they could, really nurture those best in class funders? What are some characteristics?
Oftentimes it'll be the ones that have already made that switch over to their general operating funder. And that means that when they give grants out, they are not the ones telling the grantee where this funding needs to go specifically to this program or to this staff position. It really is based on trust. It really is based on them knowing that the grantee is the expert in what they need and where they need to allocate that funding to make the biggest difference. So when I see that a funder is offering general operating support, that is already a very early sign of like, okay, they get it. Like they really understand that we're not having to pretzel ourselves into building out a program or a project or something just to be able to apply, when at the end of the day, like we just need operating support. It's just hard out there. It just is, especially in times we find ourselves in now. So that's a really good sign. I also love the ones that provide multi-year support, especially if it's general operating, because everybody knows it's almost more, it is really hard when a small nonprofit gets a $50,000 1-year grant, and then that next year they don't. It's like, what on earth happens then? I almost would recommend then don't get it in the first place, which is something horrible. And I always want money to go to the right place, but that's a huge deficit to then make up for that next year. So multi-year general operating, usually, a really strong web presence or LinkedIn presence where you can see the people behind the work that's happening, very easy contact information to find on the web. And it's really great when they say, reach out to us, and they actually mean it. There's a few funders here in Oregon that specifically in their grant application will say, who from our foundation have you talked to prior to applying? And if you leave that blank, it's kind of a naughty thing because they want to hear from you. They really want to vet that and make sure it's a good use of resources, because everybody knows that nonprofits are strapped for time and capacity. Funders are also strapped for time and capacity, and they don't want to be reading applications that clearly are not aligned when they could have saved that nonprofit a lot of time earlier on if we had just had a simple 5-minute conversation. So those are things that I see. And then the ones that offer feedback for a declined application, or even feedback for an awarded one. You always want to know, what was it about our application that really helped it raise to the top? Or if we didn't make the cut, what can we do better next time? And to be able to have that insight to know if it's even worth applying in the future, again, saves so much time and headache, and just the unknowns are known. You know what you can do better next time.
Yeah, I really love what you're saying. A lot of those indicators hold true with corporate as well. If I always encourage people to be reaching out and trying to get a dialogue going. And I appreciate that there's such a volume that every single outreach can't translate into a full conversation. That may not be realistic for the funder. But if they'll even answer a couple of questions, say, I say, if you have a couple of ideas, write the 2 ideas in 1 sentence or in a couple of sentences and get directional advice, because, sometimes it's just a little signal that you're on the right track. For bigger proposals, I think a phone call should happen, right? But with some of the smaller ones, it's just, the time commitment isn't there. So I think a lot of what you said holds true for corporate as well. I like, if there is going to be something that you have to fill out online, I love it when they have like a first wave that's super short. Like,
Mhm. A
it's
letter of intent.
like, yeah,
Yep.
letter of
I agree.
intent or just a quick thing, like, where they can then say, yeah, we've looked at your quick thing and it is worthwhile moving forward, or let's have a conversation and see if it's worthwhile moving forward. But like, to go right to the document that requires like impact metrics and all these things that we know are hard, and to your point, attachments and yada yada yada, when you haven't got a clear indication that there's a good chance of a yes, I mean, to me, that's the kind of thing that's really dragging down our sector as a whole. Like, there are mechanisms to stop that much work from happening.
For
But,
sure.
and I think we need a few more unicorns, I guess is my point. Like, I think what you're describing does not seem like it should be insurmountable for a greater number of foundations. Similarly, in my market, there definitely is, both on the corporate foundation side and on the general foundation side, a good number that fit what you're describing, and then there's a bunch that don't fit what you're describing. And I think from my point of view, maybe one of the reasons is they're trying to protect themselves and their time, but sometimes at the expense of the time and effort of the charity. And I think that there's a place in the middle where we can protect everybody's time, right? Like,
For sure. For sure. I totally agree. And I think one other thing that I should have mentioned is really making sure a lot of my unicorn funders, they will have workshops for prospective grantees to get
right.
a lot of grantees in the same room, so they're all hearing the same information, and from there the of like, ooh, this maybe isn't exactly what I thought it was. Maybe I won't apply this time because I'm not as aligned as I thought that I was. Or, we have a really cool thing here in Oregon. It's called Conversations with Funders. And so a lot of the big, primary general operating funders will do kind of a roadshow across the state as well as virtually. They're all in the same room. So you can table and you can go talk to all of these different program officers from different funders all at the same time, have a face to put with a name, begin to build that relationship. And it's all happening right then and there. You're not having to then set aside a lot more time of trying to get on somebody's calendar over here. I mean, it's all right there for the taking. It's like a buffet. But so that's really cool too. When I see that funders are doing those types of things, or are one of the ones that are on a panel or something like that, that's a really good sign too of like they want to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, and they want those that are aligned and advancing what they want to have happen in the world to come forward, right? Like, they're so you've said a few times, a thread I want to pull. You've mentioned the word relationship a few times, and I definitely see in my work one of the big mistakes is like going straight to the website, filling out the thing, and hitting submit. And I'll say, well, did you talk to them first? And the answer is no. And so I did ask you, and I want you to share publicly, where does relationship fit for you in this process? Yes, we all know that there is ultimately, most often, some kind of application form that gets filled out.
Sure.
But I have a tagline, like, that's the hill I'm dying on. I'm like, don't fill out the portal. It's the road to no. I talk about this all the time. Like, if someone tells you to fill out the portal without answering any of your questions or acknowledging you at all, that could be them saying no.
Right.
So I want to hear how you fit relationships into your approach to foundation fundraising.
Yeah, for sure. So I really look at grant seeking as kind of a continuum. And so how we support our clients is initially with that, prospecting and research phase, to then have a grant calendar developed with our own insights of how we've experienced these funders in the past interactions, that sort of thing. And so then once we know the grants that we are going after for each client specifically, that's when we reach out to funders directly to introduce the client, or I'll draft an email for the client on their behalf. It's always nice when the funder hears from the client rather than me. They're tired of hearing from me. Like,
Right.
it's Elaine again. But that like pivotal piece before we even put pen to paper of that relationship building, like that is the one I think that gets overlooked the most, because yes, it takes time. And if you find out about a grant opportunity with maybe 2 weeks notice, it's almost hurtful to then try and do that with a program officer, because they're already strapped. There's a deadline. They've been on all of these meetings. Like, we should have been planning this, months ago. So is there another cycle that would make more sense? You want to wait, to make sure that you have that time to build that relationship. That's always what I would encourage, rather than willy-nilly trying to get it all put together. But yeah, that relationship piece, I guess, is the second hill that I'll die on, in terms of like, I can't tell you how many times I have, had a grant application in, and, I hear back from a program officer after the fact, because they went to bat for us in that board meeting,
Right.
because we had taken the time to get to know them, to really get to understand, what is the board looking for? How can we really align this application in the best way possible? When if we didn't have that relationship, it would have just been a, nope, try again next time, or yes, but why? Like, what was it about us that stood out? So you get so much insight and so much nuance, because every funder is a little bit different. It's kind of fun.
So true. And I've more than once had, even when we've had, like, whether we've had the conversation, I've submitted it, and maybe there's something like a nuance that we didn't cover, and it's not quite right. And they'll call and say, hey, before, this goes forward, like, fix this or put this little thing in. Right. So we have a approach where right after we've submitted, we tell the client to like send a note saying, hey, I've incorporated your feedback, and, hit submit. If you have any immediate feedback, let me know, because sometimes it is like a process where one person looks at it, perhaps your program officer, but then it's going to travel, right? It's going to a committee, or it's going to other people. And so if that person, and you have a relationship with that person, they might give you early tips on adjustments, and can save you again. I think that it's so true. I think it's often underestimated how much internal advocacy there is for different proposals. And you only get that advocacy if you've done what you're talking about, like had that conversation, built that relationship, and sometimes over time. That's why I do think, even if you get no the first time, sometimes that's one of the steps on the road to a bigger grant in the future, a successful grant in the future. It's, it is pretty common, in corporate fundraising, certainly, to not always get yes the first time, even when that does eventually turn out. Is that, common with you as well? Yeah,
it is. It absolutely is. And and I would say, when you are in conversation with folks that are giving you that valuable time and allowing you to ask questions, like, that's always a thing. Like, just a simple thank you. Like, I remind them, like, yes, I understand this is, time on your calendar, but not every funder does this. Like, thank you for helping us to make sure that if it is a no, not in alignment, like, we're not wasting your time. You're not wasting our time. This is great. Thank you. This is fabulous. But like, I think often program officers, because everybody's inundated, I think they get kind of beaten down as well. And like, they're having to say no to a lot of people, or like convey that message as the messenger. That's never fun. So just being human and reminding them, like, that is so valuable that they are willing to take the time, and like, because they probably don't hear thank you nearly enough. So that's a little tip.
Showing some appreciation goes a long way. I talk about relationship first corporate fundraising, and that very much sounds like what you're talking about there too. Is, everybody would prefer to give money to someone that that they like to work with, that they get along with. I mean, and so the more that you can sort of build a rapport with the person, I think the better off. And doing the nice things, saying thank you, showing appreciation, making it easy for them to work with you by, showing up on time, having your stuff organized, like all those little things, they make a big difference in the long run. Because in the end, yes, there's criteria and there's tick boxes and all those things, but lots of people are going to fit that. And at some point they have to make some choices. And so why wouldn't they choose, the organization that they've collaborated with and had a conversation with and like the leader of. So I think that's, really, really good advice to, show some gratitude, be a good person. Okay. We only have a few minutes left. I want to see if we could give a couple of tangible things. So if you were going to give, people listening a couple of tangible things they could do this week or the next couple of weeks to really like move themselves forward in a more focused way, a more strategic way, as you described, a way that doesn't feel like this last minute, scramble, what would you suggest they do?
I mean, if there is a semblance of a list or a semblance of a grant calendar, and you look over what's coming up the next quarter, I mean, pick up the phone, give folks a call, try and have a conversation or try and schedule some time on their Calendly to really talk through an appropriate approach, whether an approach is appropriate, I should say, in terms of the funders that you have identified. And the sooner the better, because nobody likes a last minute scrambling. I mean, that only puts a bad taste in folks' mouth in terms of like, oh, if they're last minute in like approaching me to have a simple conversation, are they going to be last minute in, submitting an interim report or a final report, or are these guys a little bit flaky? So it's just, let's always put our best foot forward. So, but yeah, and just remembering like the right funders are the ones that want to hear from you. Don't be intimidated. I mean, reach out. The worst that can happen is you don't get a response or they say, no, I don't have time. That's okay. At least so that would be tangibly what I would recommend. And we use a grants database. Instrumental is our favorite because you can look at 990s and like what are the odds of funding, new grantees versus returning grantees, like all of that kind of stuff. Like really do your homework. A lot of this stuff is public record and you can dig through 990s for the rest of your life and probably still not look at all of them. But like there's a lot of clues that can be received from that type of research. But at the end of the day, like the real golden nuggets of what you're going to receive is through conversation. So don't be afraid.
Yeah, I love that advice. I will say for my Canadian listeners, Grant Connect is available. It's a similar database to Instrumental. There are others out there, so you can search for some other tools. I do also recommend that if you are getting started on this journey, you might want to start with getting a database list or something, so you have like a launching off point, or turn to an expert like Elaine, others that are out there to see if you can find somebody who can help guide this process for you. Because I think one of the things that gets underestimated is the amount of expertise. As you've already heard through this conversation, Elaine talks about all the things that she knows about these different grant funding bodies that you can't know because you're not, talking to them every day and seeing them across a variety of different clients. The same happens for me. I hear about this, the same companies, the same things that are going on with a bunch of different organizations, and you can aggregate that knowledge over time and gives you insights that any singular organization would be more challenged to have. Now, obviously there's fundraisers who've done this, for their whole career, and they might have that kind of knowledge as well. But if you're new to it and you don't have this expertise, I think it, really makes a lot of sense to reach out to a grant expert because they will have, just knowledge that it's difficult to get. But in the absence of that, as Elaine suggested, getting a list, getting started with conversations. I also love the idea of, in Oregon, you have roundtables. We definitely have online webinars that have foundation and grant making bodies at them. There's conferences they go to. I do have a sort of general recommendation, always like go where people are and start having some conversations. If you're getting started, having a few conversations and getting to know a few people, will put some, wind in that calendar, right? Those names can go on there first, and then you can fill in from there instead of, like starting without any relationships. If you can start with a few relationships, I think that's a big win. So, that idea of look for where, some of these people are and go to a workshop or two, online or offline, because that's a great piece of advice. Thank you so much, Elaine. I think people will have got a number of really, really great nuggets. If they have any other questions, please don't hesitate to put them in. Elaine or I will jump in to LinkedIn after and answer any of your questions. If people want to learn more about Just Look Left and how you support grant finding, where should they go and what resource do you have for them?
Thank you, Heather. Our website's justlookleft.com. We have a really fun freebie on there, grant readiness tool. So go on there, download it. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, Just Look Left Grants, as well as Instagram at Just Look Left Grants. So I'm all over the place. But yeah, I'd love to connect. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time, everybody, today. Any questions, drop them here and do connect with Elaine or I, and we'd be happy to answer your questions. Thank you and have a great day.